Once upon a time, there was a kid named Andy who loved sailing. Andy read and reread a book about a guy who sailed all the way around the world. He thought, how amazing would that be? Andy grew up to have a great life with some amazing children he wanted to be an example for, and he built a fulfilling career serving others, coaching Olympians and some of the greatest athletes in the world, coaching college students and young entrepreneurs and business people and teachers and fellow coaches. Over the more than 3 decades of Coach Andrew's career, he's had an incredibly positive impact on thousands of lives, all while helping people achieve their dreams. Now, Andrew is embarking on a dream of his own, sailing around the world in the Clipper Round the World race. 42,000 miles, 11 months sailing the globe, sailing into port on 6 of the world's 7 continents. It's the adventure of a lifetime, young Andy's dream manifested by Andrew's ongoing belief and positive mindset. Where in the world is Andrew Moss? Let's find out. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Kay. Nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you too. Where in the world are you?
I am in my sister's cottage cabin. I think Canadians and Americans call them different things. But it's a cottage, but
Okay.
it looks like a cabin from the outside. It's a very nice cabin. It's a brand new, rebuilt. It used to be a very nice little rustic uh, cottage cabin, and now it's definitely more substantial. My sister and her husband Graham did a lot of work over the last few years, and so this is the first time I've had a chance to see it. And Nick and I have been able to spend the first, basically, it'll be 2 weeks of September up here. And we were just talking before recording that school's back in, and so everybody left on Sunday to go home. Sunday and Monday, I guess, with Monday being the holiday.
Hmm.
And now we seem to have the whole lake to ourselves, and we've been enjoying some beautiful weather and lunchtime cruises in the pontoon boat, and been it's been quite nice. A nice, relaxing way to start re-entering life after August was fairly busy with family things, and then this has been the start of time for us and time for me to figure out what comes next.
I feel like I remember you saying somewhere along the way that you were looking forward to walking your daughter down the aisle and having some time to put your feet up.
Yeah, I had two big personal things. One was walking Katrina down the aisle, which happened on August the 16th, and we had a great day and a great
Uh,
ceremony, and had a lot of fun. And I managed to get my speech out without crying and without forgetting anything. So I was very pleased with that. And then the next day, I drove my youngest daughter, Danielle, out to university in Nova Scotia.
wow.
So that was a fun road trip, and we got her all moved into her new apartment, and yeah, so that was sort of 2 weeks of really personal family stuff. Got a chance to see my eldest daughter Renee at the wedding as well, which was nice, and I'm gonna circle back and spend some time with her after we get back from the lake. So yeah, it's been full on family wise, but this week and next week are slow back down and take some time to really have some quiet time, have some reflection. And as it turns out, I'm doing some studying for an upcoming course that I'm taking, so it's been also a good place to come to for some space to do that.
Well, that's exciting. I'm curious what the course is about.
Well, one of the benefits, I guess, of sailing around the world is that you gain the practical experience required to um, qualify for the highest levels of sort of international sailing certification. And
Oh, wow.
if you have, yeah, if you have that certification, it allows you to be hired and paid for as a sort of a professional skipper or professional crew on other people's boats or to charter a boat and charge people. So it's a prerequisite uh, for being paid in the boating industry. And so it just turned out that there was a final course in Canada being offered to complete the theoretical and practical assessment that they do. There was one at the end of September that was available. It was sold out, and so I hadn't been doing much of the prep work because I was thinking I wasn't going to get to it till May. But then somebody canceled this week, and so they emailed me to say, "Well, hey, there's a spot open if you want it." And that's in, what is it today, the 5th? So it's on the 23rd, so just over 2 weeks from now.
Wow.
So yeah, so I have a whole bunch of prep to do and studying to do. Some of it, is familiar, and some of it is theoretical stuff that I haven't spent a lot of time studying before. I just finished the diesel engine course, which is part of it. So I haven't, my dad took care of most of the diesel engine problems when we were sailing as a family, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I didn't stick my nose in there very often. So that was a good training. I just finished that up this morning. So yeah, so doing a lot of that and getting ready to do that course at the end of September, which will then sort of potentially, give me a resume um, to do different things career-wise in the future, if that's what I choose.
Wow, that is really cool. Feels like a way to mix, you know, several of your favorite ways to bring value and enjoy and have enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I have sort of mixed feelings right now about that. I've heard a lot of people say that, careful that you don't, make your passion your profession, because you might
Mm,
lose the passion for it when it's work. But, the idea of sailing and being paid for it, or the idea of combining coaching on a boat, um, and just having the expertise to basically be able to charter a boat anywhere in the world,
mm.
um, you know, and take it out without any concern. All of that is quite interesting and certainly opens up a lot more possibilities. So I thought I couldn't really see the downside of not doing it, and certainly having done Clipper, it gave us a huge head start on being able to get this certification. So I thought it was worth worth putting the time in right now.
Feels like one of those breadcrumbs.
It does feel like one of those breadcrumbs. Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Um, okay. So I'm going to ask this question in a way other than asking a question. I'm going to make a statement. This is like the big daddy of all of the questions that I've had since I've ever known that you were going to do this. uh, there's a wonderful Terry Pratchett quote. It is, uh, coming back to where you started is not the same as never leaving. And I'm really super curious what that quote brings up for you on this end of the coming back to where you started.
Hmm. That is a great question. I should have known that one was coming. But I prefer not to know, because it's always interesting what comes up.
Yeah.
Well, I think the obvious things are that, well, I sailed around the world, so I actually did sail 46,000 miles, and circled all the oceans and touched 6 continents, and stayed healthy enough to keep going. Was able to lead a group of people with all kinds of different backgrounds and personalities and interests. Was able to garner I think the respect of my crew and my skipper and our assistant skipper. Um, and to step off the boat at the end feeling proud of how I had shown up, and
Mm.
you know how I had contributed, even if, the results race wise were not ideal. So all of that is different than where I was before I left.
Mm.
But those are just sort of like resume things, It's like, yes, I've proven or reproven that I can do things. Sailing around the world is a real accomplishment that, I it's not just feeling proud that I've done it. It's just knowing that I was able to do that opens up the possibility for goals of any size, really, because I'm not sure there is a lot bigger thing to do than to try to go in a little sailboat that goes like 10 miles an hour and sail around the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So, but deeper than that, I think that sailing and the kinds of conditions that we went through, um, and the environment with all kinds of different people and personalities really taught me that, a lot about myself and about my ability to stay mindful and stay in a responsive state, not a reactive state. Um, I think I learned a lot more about the importance of our sort of human biology on how our mind works and how well our mind works. Like the days when I didn't get great sleep were the days that my mindfulness was challenged most.
Mm.
The days, when I rested well, it was easy. And and so being more conscious that, our, physical well-being, or including sleep and exercise and nutrition and all of those things, um, do play a part in how mindful or how easily mindfulness can come.
Mm.
And I think that was, I knew that, sort of intellectually knew that, but I also realized that, and I realized this early in the race, and I'm sure I said it on one of the podcasts, that, you know, most of us, or let me say me personally, I had set my life up in a very safe way
I
where
do remember that. Yeah.
I was very clearly picking the people I wanted to be around and avoiding people who would be too bothersome to my well-being or to my mental calm. And I think I'm more open to seeing a little bit broader, group of people around me, and I'm certainly know that I'm quite capable of being in a good, mindful, calm, responsive place, no matter who the people are, and even in the harshest of conditions. So I think that's feels good to know that that growth has come. Um, I think that, the year away for me and for Manik challenged our relationship in lots of different ways. Some we had anticipated and some not so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming back and recognizing as soon as I stepped off the boat that we were back as we had been before. Um,
Mm.
so all of the worrying, um, and I'll be honest, I did less worrying than Manik did, and just because we have a different nature that way. That,
Mm.
but I think a lot of it, or all of it, was put at ease once I was back on land and we had, an hour or two to spend catching up in
Wow.
person, because it had been 6 months, I guess, since we had seen each other in Australia. So that, and what's interesting about that is that that is true. And I think we both changed individually in that year apart.
Mm.
Both of us grew in different ways and gained new insights about ourselves, gained new strengths that we didn't have before, or broadened the strengths that we had in new ways. And so it was, I think coming back and seeing that we could both be different, but that didn't compromise the relationship. That was really nice to experience and nice to see.
Mm,
and
I
has
bet.
been and continues to be. So
Yeah.
um yeah, and then I think the last thing I'll say is I gave myself permission when I set off that I had made no commitments to what I would continue doing when I got back.
Hmm.
Um, so from a career perspective, uh, obviously from a family perspective, yes, but not from a career perspective. So coming back, um, I think if I had never left, it would have been very easy to just sort of stay on the same path and maybe make a tweak or two here and there.
Hmm.
Um, Coming back and having a clean slate is it feels um, very exciting and a little scary all at the same time
Hmm.
because you don't I don't know at this point the answers yet to what it is I'm going to do. And and I have this sense that there's some momentum that has to be started to get going in terms of whatever direction that's going to be. So, and time ticks by. So it's just there's this little bit of a sense of urgency, but I'm also trying to stay in a place where I let sort of those breadcrumbs show up and I follow what inspires me. So it's right now it's a bit of a game of patience versus urgency,
Hmm.
and that's just where I'm at. So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine now not having done it. Um,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
It's like
and
imagine not having a
and
child, your child or something, right? Yeah.
well, exactly, yeah, exactly. Um, and and at the same time, and I've heard this from a lot of people who did the race, it feels like it could have been 10 years ago already. It's a very
Wow.
strange thing that you step out of this make-believe world on the boat that is so unique and so different to what life on land is like. And there's something about the volume of life on land and
Mm,
how quick it is and how busy it is and how dense it is in terms of all the stuff that's going on. It just it just kind of creates this separation from having done that that kind of doesn't really coincide with the time that's passed because it's only been a little while, right? It's only
mm.
been end of July. Well, yeah, like just over a month, basically. Um, Feels like years.
Wow.
And so I don't know what that's about, but I know that it has felt very weird coming back into, even though I've come back into a very eased schedule. Some people had to go back into full-time jobs and all that, and I don't know that I would have handled that well because
Mm,
I knew coming back that I wanted to figure out um, what comes next in a in a patient way. And but yeah, it's been weird. It's been really weird. Um,
fascinating.
so yes, for anybody who's listening to this, um, yeah, coming back to where you started is absolutely not the same as never having left. And you absolutely will have no clue what the difference is when you set off, but you just have to set off.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well said. Um, I got to thinking about well, a couple of things. I mean, we've just spent a couple of weeks in Maine, by some lakes and out of the world in the sense of like no internet, no Wi-Fi, no sort of connection. And
Mhm.
coming back even just after 2 weeks like that, it was so um like there's printed matter everywhere. There's billboards, there's stuff to like it's all so distracting.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and I remember just getting when I was I'd finished hiking across England. I'd been up in the moors and, like very isolated a lot like you, right? For almost the whole part of it. And then the airport, and it might have been the same airport. I don't know. Did you leave through there's a great big airport in Britain that's name is in London that's name is eluding me.
No, I think you flew out of Heathrow and
Heathrow,
I flew
yes.
out of Gatwick. But
Okay.
yes, I've been to Heathrow many times. It could be overwhelming for some people. Yeah.
The departure, like international departures, was like it was like a movie. It was like walking
Mhm.
into just an insane, and I've been so curious about like what has your return been like from that standpoint of like there's so much more, it's so busy, there's so much going on in this modern world. And it's not that you were never in the modern world, it's just that you were a little bit out of it, right? I mean, you'd be in some
Mhm.
different places, but then you'd be back on the boat where it was a watch on and a watch off, and it was there's no choices about what I'm doing next. And yeah, I wonder if
Yeah.
you'd speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that has been definitely an adjustment and on an ongoing adjustment. And even when we stopped in port, I didn't go straight back into sort of normal life. I would often stay on the boat and, keep working on, I had a job on the boat to keep the maintenance of the gear done. So there was always stuff to do that was related to the boat. And
Mm,
so my time away from the boat might have been 2 or 3 days in most of the ports. Um, so I don't know that I ever felt like I got back into that life.
mm,
But yeah, I don't know what to say. It's everything you just said for sure. Like the amount of inputs that are coming at you all the time.
mm,
Um, the the decision, like the seemingly endless decisions that can be made in any moment. The volume of everything, like just in terms of like not noise necessarily, but just like everything is busier and noisier
mm,
and um yeah, it just feels like everything's happening at like 10 times the speed of life on the boat. And
mm,
um, I got quite fond of the speed of life on the boat, to be honest. Um, um, so yeah, and I mean, obviously, like the comforts of life are nice to come back to. It's nice to have a fridge full of food to choose from and
mm,
all that. But at the same time, like I've actually come back and appreciated like, wow, we actually ate really, really well for given the circumstances. We had great people who cared about the food that they made for us every day. And, I learned a lot about how to cook for other people. And like
mm,
that was something that I have more appreciation for now that I'm back on land than maybe I did on the boat even. Um, I marvel at the fact that I was able to get enough sleep on the boat to survive and thrive a little bit.
mm,
Because, yes, it's a nice to hop in a nice comfy bed, but I don't feel any more rested at the end of 8 or 9 hours of sleep than I did, you know, in days where it was like 3 shifts of sleeping 2 or 3 hours at a time. So
mm,
I'm curious about that. Um, So yeah, you know, I think coming back, it's been a little confusing to be honest, and I think I'm still trying to wrap my head about how to craft a life on land that has as many of the positive qualities from life on the water as
mm,
possible, and how to do that. Um, so that's sort of a work in progress, I would say, right now. And
mm,
part of that is also, uh, we don't have a home, so it's figuring out, are we traveling more? Are we gonna get a place for a while? Are we gonna, settle down at some point and get a house again? Like there's a lot of questions around sort of where home is going to be
mm.
that are also factoring into probably what this feels like right now.
Fascinating. I remember talking to you in Washington, and you were like the spirit was so light when you said, "I have no fixed address." And it
Yeah.
was like just you were thrilled with it, right? And
Mhm.
um it's interesting to hear you kind of being curious about like what is that actually like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel excited about it, but it
Hmm.
definitely factors into all the decision making that you're going to make, right? Like
Mm,
even in terms of, what kind of work do I want to do? Well, if somebody offered me a full-time job out of the blue, um, somewhere in Canada, close to where my kids live, um, that would be very interesting.
mm,
Um, like I'd have to think about that. And then that would mean, well, geez, so I need to live somewhere.
mm.
Um, and then that would factor into a conversation with Minik about, is it time to stop traveling, or how do we keep traveling? How do you travel? Or, like, how do we make this all work? And so there's just a lot of variables all at once,
Mm.
you know, um, which just makes making decisions a little bit um, more complex, I guess.
Yeah.
But I still think that one of those one of those variables is going to show itself um, in a very, powerful way in the next few months, I'm sure, and that will make the rest of the decisions easy to make.
Mm.
So and I don't know which variable it's going to be. It could be, it could be work. It could be, a house, like a home opportunity. It could be, an opportunity to sail again. I don't know. But I'm trusting that something is going to show up that's going to sort of point us in a direction, and then that direction will lead to all the other decisions being made.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an openness, right?
Yep. Yeah,
That
absolutely. And I think that was the biggest freedom that we got when we sold the house and got rid of all the junk, is that it just it opened up the possibility to say yes to so many more things
Mhm.
that were exciting to us. And so that continues to be the case, almost even more so now for me. I can say yes to almost anything because um, I don't have a lot that's holding me to any one thing right now. So, um, and my next plans are to keep traveling and keep doing some of the things that she was really inspired by. So that's also factoring into, well, we may be traveling separately, or we may be traveling together, and it
Mhm.
may be a bit of both. So we'll see. Yeah, there's
Mm.
lots of unknowns, but it feels okay right now for that to be the case. And we'll see how it goes going forward.
Yeah. Wow. Um, thank you. That's really like such a mm, the openness of it. I just am really inspired by, I think. I'm curious about you just alluded to this. What's it been like to go from you get 2 hours of sleep or 3 hours of sleep every 4 or 5 times a day? To like, do you sleep through the night? Like, do you feel tired during the day? Like, what's that been like after a whole
Yeah,
year?
yeah. I was amazed at this even during the race. As soon as we got to land, um, I had no problem going back to a normal sleep cycle.
Hmm.
It was very, very surprising, and like on the trip to Uruguay and the trip across to Seattle, that was 4 weeks of the same pattern of sleep, um, and and yet the first night, even if it was sleeping on the boat, the first night it was 8 hours straight, no problem. That might have been exhaustion more than my body's clock
Hmm.
adjusting. But no, I haven't had any issue with getting back to normal sleep cycles. And it's funny because I remember at one point on the boat going, I love this schedule. Like, I love the idea of sort of sleeping for a while and breaking up the day into smaller chunks and having rest. And I was like, I'm going to keep doing this when I get back on land. Like I'm going to get up at 2 in the morning and work for 2 or 3 hours and then go back to sleep. And then that's not
That
happening.
hasn't
So
happened.
uh, yeah, so um, but I think it could, like, if I had an opportunity that had international time zone challenges, and I needed to do some work at different hours of the day, I definitely feel more confident now that I could go to that kind of schedule and be very, very high functioning with a very different structure to how the sleep happened.
Wow.
So yeah, but right now, straight back to normal 7, 8 hours sleep whenever
I-
possible.
In
And
a row.
yeah, feel in a row. Yes, yes. And feeling pretty good about that.
You had said, so I asked you a question one time, which was around like something like, do you feel like you'll you'll require as much, almost like I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something around like, will you be able, how will you tolerate like lots of people or activity, or like because you're so introverted, whatever it was, you were like, oh wow, that's such an interesting question. I think it had to do with like being around lots of people again after the boat. And
Hmm.
do you remember that at all? I should have looked back or listened
Yeah,
back to the thing too.
I don't, but I can imagine the conversation because yeah, I mean the boat was interesting because you had a mix of being around people quite a bit, but there didn't need to be a ton of interaction like all the time. We were oftentimes it was a 4 hour or a 6 hour shift, and we were kind of doing the same thing for most of the time, and we might rotate jobs every hours or half an hour, but it wasn't like a whole lot of interaction. Although we had very social people on the boat who were much happier having ongoing conversation and always sort of dialoguing with each other, and that could happen, and other people could have more solitude, and that was always sort of respected, that everybody could do their own thing.
Mm.
um yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I've gotten back into life at its fullest yet to know how the contrast is going to be. I kind of hid away, when I first got back, and then I went to the wedding, which was, for the day of the wedding was a busy day, but it was full of joy and love and fun. So it was easy to enjoy that. And then, the trip out to the East Coast was just Danielle and I. So it was a lot of just the two of us chatting and getting her
Mhm.
moved in. And then I drove back on my own, stopped and saw some friends, but it was a lot of quiet time to myself. Um, yeah, that was a weird, like even driving back, I think I drove 10 or 11 hours straight with only like a bathroom, McDonald's
Wow.
stop, gas stop, and actually really enjoyed the long shift of just going and listening to some podcasts and some music. And so that was that. And then again kind of hid away for a little bit and then come up here. So and up here there's just the two of us, so I haven't really had the big social interactions yet except for the wedding, and so I don't know yet. But
Mm.
like I said, I think one of the things the boat taught me is I can be okay in the um, busier environments with lots of different people, and I definitely have a tolerance for lots of different people with lots of different energy, and can enjoy that more now than I think I knew I was capable of before the race.
And that's what that question was. It was something like, do you think that your sort of requirement or your need for solitude will have changed
Hmm.
when you're done? And I think you basically gave exactly the same response as you just did, which is like, actually, I do.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be better at this now, or this is something that I'll be
Yeah.
able to tolerate.
Yeah. And I don't know if I'm going to go chasing more, but
Mm,
if that's what appears, then I'll be happy and comfortable to go into that. I think I'm still naturally a pretty introverted and person who enjoys the solitude and the time to reflect and just take things in. And that's even when I'm in a group of people. Like I'm happy to just sit and be the observer and watch them all banter on for hours on end. And I just sort of enjoy the watching of it versus the participating in it.
hmm hmm Cool. Um, something that has been coming. I mean, I feel like this is all sort of the you know, post race kind of integration or reintegration. And one aspect of uh, that I've been curious about, like almost maybe feels like an even deeper level of coming back to where you started. Because I feel like for me there was a time when I got back from England and I was reintegrating into my life. There was this sort of time that I think of with the sound effect of like ploosh. Like there was this sort of, okay, it's all moving and I'm here. And it was a little disorienting. And I don't even know if that makes any sense, but is there a sort of anything like that for you or
Well, what did that sound like? What
the
did that
ploosh?
represent for you? Yeah.
I think it was a sort of a, a having reset my inner sort of workings to a very peaceful, um, aware, but really quiet state.
Hmm.
And there was some disorientation as I figured out how to retain that and, enjoy my life. Like, I think
Mhm.
that's maybe what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes to all of that. I don't know that I heard the sound effect, but yeah, I mean, my observation after a few days getting back was, oh yeah, everybody else's life continued on while I was away
Mm,
doing this silly thing that I did. And so whatever I gained or however I changed, um, I now have to insert back into a reality that has been continuing on. And for a lot of the people, continuing on in a fairly unchanged way from a year prior,
mm,
like um, their lives haven't changed that much, or um, the routines are familiar and the environment is familiar and all that. And so you come back in and it's just like, yeah, you kind of get pulled along back into that life very quickly. And it is jarring, like for sure, when it first happens. And then you kind of realize, like, oh, yeah, like that experience is over now. And whatever I am taking from it is going to come with me, but it's going to come with me into something that I now have to create in a new world, in a new surrounding.
mm.
And yeah, that's still a work in progress, I think, because um, you forget, especially for being away for a year, you forget a lot of the details of what that what that means, right?
Yeah.
So you come back into it, it's like, oh yeah, I've got all these other things to worry about now, or to not to worry, but to consider that are all factors in making a decision on what to do next. So yeah, it's interesting, and I'm sure it's for anybody that goes away and does something or has a big change of environment for a period of time, that reentry is a really interesting process. And I think it teaches you a lot about the things that you value and then the things that, um, become more of a nuisance once you've had some separation from them. And
Mm,
so I think that's sort of the reentry process now, is to say, what do I want to keep about the environment that I really enjoyed? And what do I want to kind of eliminate from, um, from just going back by default into the way I was living before?
yeah. Yeah. You've said too that like the fact of a year, like it's amazing what you can accomplish in a year, you know. And I actually, I just want to, I'm excited to interject this. Um, my 24-year-old is, as we speak right now, sitting his federal paramedic exam because he's spent the
Mm,
last year training
mhm,
and, you know, doing clinicals and being in ambulances and learning how to do all kinds of crazy things to save lives. And he is like today now, uh, you know, bringing that to the point where he can actually go and do what he wants to do. So, like, there's a
mm,
lot of cool ways to spend a year if you think about a year, right?
mm. Yeah, there's a lot of cool ways, and and whether it's putting tens of thousands of miles behind you of sailing, or going from being Kay's son to being a paramedic, a
An
certified
EMT to,
paramedic, yeah,
yeah,
an
yeah,
EMT saving lives. You know, people underestimate, you know, what's possible. And you know, and time is such a fascinating thing when you're out there doing something that's really meaningful and you're really engrossed in it, and you know, in the experience. That a year, I think I mentioned this from Portsmouth just after we arrived. Like when we sailed back into Portsmouth, it felt like we had just left.
hmm
Like the time, the sense of time was so warped. And as I've said on our call today, even now, like it feels like such a long time ago in so many ways. Um, so yeah, when you're in it, it's really like making the most of the embracing and enjoying and taking in the whole experience. Um, because yeah, like time and life just has a funny way of just marching on when it's done, and then it's like, oh yeah, like I guess I have to, keep up now, right? Like I don't get to stay in this experience and revel in it forever. I kind of have to keep marching on. And so it's fascinating. I think, a year, but I think it's a broader thing. It's just how time, when we're engrossed in something that we're really passionate and enjoying, and is challenging, and is taking us into places we've not been, both like internally.
yeah,
um, Time is just such a cool thing, and I think we assume that time is always kind of the same, when we think, well, there's no way I could do that in a year, but we base that off of how productive we are in our normal, perhaps unpassionate, unfocused life. um,
right.
we think, well, boy, I have a hard time getting the laundry done in a day. Well, in a day, we could sail 300 miles. We could go from, one place 300 miles away in a sailboat in a day.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
only because we were focused and passionately pursuing that was that possible. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. And I'm still, as I've said a few times, I'm still wrapping my head around how the the sense of the experience feels, I think, different than I was expecting it would just a month after. Like I think I thought I would still be reveling in the excitement and the memories and the energy of the experience. And for whatever reason, just life and the pace of life happens, and then it just sort of fades a little quicker than I was expecting it was going to. So,
Ah,
um, so that's a learning as well.
do do you for someone who is so mindful like you, I you're reminding me of a phenomenon when I got home, which was that I kept trying to cling to things. Like I kept trying to remember memories on purpose or like look at the
Mm,
paintings I had created because I was like so afraid that I would lose the feeling of it, after
mm.
doing this pretty high performance thing. Has there been any of that for you? Have you noticed any of that?
That's an interesting comment. I caught myself yesterday because one of the things I love to do is to share sort of the insights that I've gained along the way with people who follow me on LinkedIn. And so, during the race, obviously there was lots of opportunities when we were on land. There have been lots of experience to share an insight or two. Um, and then coming back right after the race, definitely it felt natural to keep doing that. But yesterday I caught myself going like, am I clinging on to the race by continuing
Mm,
to talk about the race and about what I learned or what how it changed my perspectives? Um, like at what point is the point to move on? um,
mm.
because I get I get positive feedback from people that they appreciate the insights and the sharing and coming along for the journey through my shares, but it does feel in some way like I'm holding on to something. And I've seen some of our other crew members as well who keep posting pictures and like they're still, you know, trying to live in the moment through the pictures of the experience of the pictures. And yeah, I kind of feel like I'm like right now is sort of you're meeting me at a transition point to kind of move on and um yeah, start looking at life through the lens that I'm living in right now, as opposed to, where I've been. So
The race
that
lens.
definitely, yeah, that definitely feels like a place I'm in right now.
Wow. And if I wouldn't have been able to say this, but I wanted to give it like, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks since our last conversation. And that was really, I think, why. Because I wanted to kind of catch you in a moment where you had walked your daughter down the aisle, you had spent this family time, you had had some time to really do the things that you had said were going to be grounding, and then to be able to look out and go, oh, now it's this morning. what does
Yeah,
what does today
yeah,
hold?
yeah, 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 and I definitely feel like that's where you found me right now is is at that transition point of letting the race be what it was and all the enjoyment of it and all the relationships and the growth and all of that experience is something that absolutely I'm going to cherish, but it's not something that I'm going to sort of obsess over anymore. It just feels like something that I did and something that has changed me and something that I've been able to share with lots of people in different ways. And now it's time to see what the next journey is.
Mm,
And and that feels it feels good to do that because I do think, as you said, it's easy to stay in the past if you keep clinging to things that are are well behind us already.
yeah,
It's like trying to it's like if you're watching a movie and all you're doing in your head is thinking about that scene that happened 10 minutes earlier. It's like, well, you missed the movie that you're watching then, right?
yeah.
And I think being mindful is about being present to what's happening right now. And so it's it's been coming back and it's been sort of leaving the race where it was and appreciating it all and now taking taking what comes next.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I am sure that certainly for me and for our listeners and viewers, you will always be our favorite ocean sailor.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know I've said this over and over, but I really appreciate all the time you've put into this, Kay. um, all the editing and the recording. It was great to do it in person in Washington and for you to talk to some of our crew as well. And I really enjoyed listening to those interviews. And and they really enjoyed, the experience of being able to share their own stories.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and to everybody in the community who might see this, like all the support, of all the well wishes, the financial support, the emotional support. It was every bit of it made a big difference in how the year went and how much of it I was able to enjoy and to really relax into. Um, and it still sort of baffles me a little bit, but I take inspiration that people really enjoyed being along for the ride in sharing in the experience through the ways that we've been able to share. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate hearing that from people because it means it's more than just about me and our crew, that a whole bunch of other people were able to enjoy our experience, and maybe it's shifted their own thinking in some way about what's possible for them, or maybe take a sailing lesson or travel the world or do something out of their normal routine. We'll see, but it's been a heck of a ride.
Yeah, it's been very fun to be along on the ride as well, and to um I don't know, just it's been it's been very fun to travel around the world with you, and for you to be able to share, and take us into it is great. And it's interesting because you say like uh, about people taking steps in their own lives or doing things that inspire them based on this. We may never know, right?
We
Which
may
is,
never know. Yeah,
yeah, which is,
yeah.
I think that's kind of half the fun. Or maybe, decades from now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, I I had the opportunity to meet and talk with a woman who she was with another woman. She was the co-author of a book called The Courage to Heal, which was a really important book for me when I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And um, we happened to be both guests in the same 10 episode season of a beloved podcast called The 21st Century Creative. Which, like, how random is that? Now we are
Mm-hmm.
in 2023 or 20, I think it was 2023 or 2022. And I only discovered that she was um, who she was to me by listening to her podcast episode. And I was like, oh man, we got to talk. So we were able to have, a couple conversations, and it just like, so it feels like who knows who will come back to you in how
Yeah,
long and say, wow, you just, this was what happened for me. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Just never know.
No, I trust that that's true. I actually had a moment like that. It was quite interesting. I was telling, well, I mentioned to my sister, she knew about the inspiration of the book, of Robin Knox Johnson's book. And I had mentioned that I had managed to get him to sign it,
Mm.
before we left Portsmouth, and that we had had lots of chats around the world, as we stopped, and he was in a lot of the ports to welcome us. Um, and I said, did you realize that on the inside cover of the book is the name Orgil? And I said, Orgil, I think they were friends of our parents, and we used to go sailing with the Orgils. As families, we would sail to the same islands and together in the summertime. She goes, and I said, I think they must have given our parents the book that then ended up in my hands, that then inspired me to do the same.
Wow.
She goes, and I was telling her this when we came up to the cottage here, and she's showing us around and how to use all the boats and everything. And she said, that is weird because our neighbors in the cabin beside us are the Orgil's kids. I
Wow.
was like, what? And she goes, yeah, they will be so excited. You need to bring that book the next time you come, and you could show them that their family name is in the book that inspired you to go and do this. So it's like, So wild. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
So
There's yeah.
yes. So yes, the world is tiny. Even if you try to sail around it, it's not that big.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Even if you succeed in sailing around it.
Even if you succeed at sailing
Do you
around it. Yes.
remember you'd gotten into Uruguay and you were like, it is, you're told that the world is made up of 70% water. And now that we've done this, something like you could have convinced me that the world is like 90% water or almost all water
Yeah, yeah,
because of, and
totally.
you were surprised at how long it took you to get from Spain to Uruguay, like just because it's like such a vast distance. It's such a vast distance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I still feel that way. I still feel like now I'm sure there's people who've done, bike rides across continents, I know there's people who've done those kinds of things, and they probably think the world is 90% land when they're doing it. That's all
Yeah.
relative to your experience, I suspect. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but it's definitely connected me to the oceans and to wildlife. And, I think one of the things I've talked about to some people is just witnessing wildlife in its absolute natural state
Mm.
and watching how different kinds of wildlife interact with each other and with the ocean. And then when they see this weird thing, sailboat coming into their space, what they make of that and watching them, um, you gain a much deeper and more profound understanding that there's a level of intelligence going on outside of humans' understanding
Mm.
that that's inspiring. It's just awesome to see.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So that that connection to the oceans and to the wildlife and to the health of the oceans and the wildlife and to the importance of protecting, all of that. Um, it's definitely part of the impact of spending all the time we did in the oceans and on the oceans is, you can't you can't help but be affected by actually being there and seeing it in both in its most pristine state, but also in some of the countries in its, damaged state and seeing
Mm.
how humans are behind that. So, we'll see if that's part of what happens next. But that certainly was an impact for me of seeing as much as I had a chance to see over the past year.
Yeah. Yeah. As we're kind of wrapping up, can you take us into like maybe since you've been back, any I don't know, wildlife or sky or like are you experiencing your natural world differently now having been on the boat?
Hmm, it's an interesting question. Um, Well, I think that I even have a heightened sense, anytime I'm near the water, which is almost every day, it seems, but anytime I can be. Um, yeah, my first reaction when I see the wind and the weather is to think about how that's going to impact the boat. It's still sort of a deep like, oh, what sail would we put up right now if we were
Mm,
sailing in these conditions, right? Or like today we were out at lunch, for lunch for 2 or 3 hours, and we were just motoring around in the pontoon boat, and there was a beautiful breeze with lots of little shifty and gusty parts, and I was thinking, oh, I'd far rather be, motoring around in a little sailboat right now than a motorboat. But um, yeah, I think I definitely am more aware of the weather and more observant of the weather visually, and
mm,
and and probably I've always had a really good feel for the weather, just in terms of feeling the wind and changes. And I think that's just from time on a boat. Um, but I am studying in the course that I'm doing is the next chapter is all around weather patterns and forecasting and how weather systems work. And so it'll be interesting to take that and the experience I had and see how much I learned just by being in it for the past
mm.
year. Um, so yeah, I'm curious to see that. But yeah, I mean, I feel very connected to nature, and I think that will always be the case coming out of this is I'm going to be driven back to the oceans and the lakes and the bodies of water whenever I possibly can. And because it just feels, I feel so connected to it. And I thought I was before the year, but
Mm.
I definitely even more so now. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Mhm.
Well, any final thoughts?
Not really, like I said, I hope if this has inspired someone that they do go out, and I'd love to hear about it at some point down the road. How something that you saw or heard, or just by watching from afar, that it changed something in you and you went off and did something. Um, yeah, and also just I think the biggest learning for me that maybe I certainly hope my own kids have seen this is just there is no limit to what you're capable of, but there's also no requirement to follow the rules of how everybody else lives their lives and how everybody else goes about their business. And
Mm.
we all get to create and design that for ourselves. And as long as you do it in a respectful way for the people you care about, and take that into consideration, there's lots and lots of of opportunity to do some pretty extraordinary things. And you just have to take that step and give it a try and start. And it's amazing what you can accomplish in a year,
Mm. Yep.
or 10 or 20.
Yep. Well, you know what's interesting too? We were just talking about this before we started recording, is about like the smaller the step, often the better, right? Like it doesn't have to be. And if you think about it, you didn't circumnavigate the globe in a day or a week. It took a whole year because every
Mm-hmm.
day, every mile, every wind shift was a small step forward, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, every watch felt like a new day. It was actually very confusing on the boat that way, because every time you woke up from your off watch, you were waking up and sort of your brain was thinking, okay, I'm waking up, so that's a new day. But
Mm.
often you'd have three of those a day. So you'd be, how can it still be the same day? I've woken up three times already. Right. Um, so yeah. So yeah, small steps, yes. Um, and one of the things I think I've mentioned on one of the previous calls was um, the power of immersive experiences to help you learn something new.
Yeah.
You you would not imagine how far some of the novice people we had on the boat came by the end of the race, like those who were the around the worlders, or even those who just did two or three legs of the race, how much they improved just from being immersed in the environment 24 hours a day, um, around people who could help them get better and were eager to do so. So it doesn't need to be whatever people are curious about doing. It doesn't need to be something they have a lot of competency in right now, but you have to
Mm.
put yourself in the environment. And even in your walk, which was over 2 weeks, the
Three.
improvement,
Yeah.
or 3 weeks, sorry,
Yeah.
3 weeks, the improvement of your competency, or your belief in your competency
Mm.
from the start to the end, was just like incredible, and it was
Major.
inspiring. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the other sort of hang up. A lot of people say, well, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know if I can learn how to do that before I go. Well, you don't have to do before you go. Just get in there and you'll learn on the
Yeah.
go.
Yep. Yep. I think um that is, in my, like, for me personally, the most important learning, because, and I think it's interesting when you talk to people, what they want to do is have read all the books and have, sort of crossed the T's and dotted the I's and made sure that everything was in place before. And like
Mm.
there came a point, I'm not sure if you would say this for you, but there certainly came a point for me before, at some point getting ready to go to England, where I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna have to put myself in the flow and see what happens, like, and know that
Mm.
it's gonna be okay. You know?
Yeah, well, I think there's a little video out there that my friends in Chicago took uh, a couple of weeks before the start of the race, where I was doing my some work with One Solution, and the young people from Chicago had a session where they asked me a ton of questions about, what I was about to set off and do, and one of the questions was how do you know you can do this? And I thought, well, fascinating question the way it came out, right? Because my answer was, I don't.
Mm.
And that's the whole point of going, is to find out. And
Yeah.
like that is, and I think, I heard you say this a couple of days ago, and I've heard this from other people, is like it's not an adventure if the end is already, guaranteed
Yeah.
or known,
Yeah.
right? The whole point is to go out with the uncertainty of what the final outcome might be. Um, because that's where the growth comes from. That's where we get to, apply all of our potential and our creativity to creating the outcome, as opposed to just going through the stages and the steps to get to something that's already a known, outcome. So yeah, I mean, whatever that is for people, I think I just close by saying, you got to, like you said, you got to at some point just go from worrying to going, I'm going to go find out if I can do this. And
Yeah.
that's the adventure. And
Yeah.
feels like a good way to live your life.
Yeah. Yep. It sure does. So you're a great example of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Kay. And thanks for your time. I really enjoyed this. It's meant a lot for me. And I've started going back and listening to our episodes from the start so I could get a little bit of a reflection back on what it is the whole experience was. So that's been helpful as well. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. So just one quick follow-up question.
Sure.
What what is that like? Like that's almost like placing yourself in a year ago, right? Like what are the feelings of
Hmm.
that now? You know?
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely, um, a lot of the memories of earlier legs are very blurry. And
Mm,
so I think that the most stark thing right away was the sort of my emotional state, my energetic and emotional state at different parts of the race. It was a reminder of sort of the ups and downs of that through the race. It wasn't all sort of at the same level. And so, and I'm sure you noticed this from your viewpoint, but for me now to go back and relive it, it's like, oh yeah. And I'm also now sort of placing events that happened more accurately in the timeline of
mm,
the race than I would have from my own memory. So that's all been really helpful. And then, so I can now think about, oh yeah, I know who the people were that were on that leg, and I now know why I was in that emotional state, or I know the weather we had, or I know how the race unfolded on that race. So it's been very helpful in helping sort of organize my memory banks in a more
wow.
accurate way. Yes.
Oh, that makes me like so much. I mean, I was already glad that we did it and it's been really fun, but that makes it even feel like more um sort of it brings some meaning to it for you. Like that
Yeah.
is
No, big
really,
time.
really
Big time.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Amazing. Once again, I'm forgetting how we end this show. That happened in
Well,
DC.
well, we haven't ever ended the show as the final shows before, so I don't know. Thank you, and yeah, I look forward to talking to you again from wherever in the world I happen to be.
Yeah, yeah. And you're welcome. And thank you. I look forward to that day too. And I'm excited to think of you now sort of looking out on a new day. And you know, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. It is pretty cool. It's I'm excited. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for all of this and wishing you well as always, Andrew. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Kate.